All right, so we have a bunch of staff here from the county, the state, and FEMA to help answer your questions. Again, my name is Kelly Watson with the Boulder County Floodplain Program in the Community Planning and Permitting Department. I'm always your first point of contact for any floodplain questions in unincorporated Boulder County. I will go through the rest of the staff and let them introduce themselves. Sarah, do you want to start?
Yes, hi, my name is Sarah Heller and I work with Kelly. I'm also a floodplain planner at Boulder County.
And then Ron?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ron Flax. I'm the Deputy Director for Community Planning and Permitting, and as well as the Chief Building Official for Boulder County.
Thanks. And then Kevin?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I'm Kevin Doyle with Michael Baker International. We're a consultant that provides floodplain mapping and permitting support to Boulder County.
And Christine?
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Christine Gaines. I'm with FEMA Region 8, and I lead the mapping group for the region.
Thanks. Terry?
Yes, I'm Terry Fade. I'm the Floodplain Mapping Program Manager for the Colorado Water Conservation Board.
Marta?
Hi, everybody. This is Marta Blanco Castano. I work with the Colorado Water Conservation Board, assisting Terry Fade with the program management.
And Willem?
How's it going, everyone? My name is Willem Lensing, and I'm the NFIP Community Assistance Program Specialist with CWCB.
And Casey?
Hi, everyone. Casey Robinson. I work at AECOM, an engineering firm that helps CWCB with flood hazard studies.
Right. Thank you, everyone. I think I got all of the staff that we have in today. All right. So our goals for tonight are to inform you all about the upcoming changes to floodplain maps, including how we got here and the next steps. We have two parallel processes happening, the update to the FEMA maps and the update to the county maps, and we're going to talk through all of that. On the county side, we are going to be holding hearings before the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners next year to align the county's floodplain maps with the future FEMA map. So this is also an opportunity for us to hear your questions and concerns in advance of those hearings. You can always send questions or comments to floodplainadmin@bouldercounty.gov. And so this is a two-way dialogue. So please, just a reminder to be respectful of everyone here in our virtual room this evening so that we can have a fair and open dialogue. All right, I don't think I need to remind anyone in Boulder County of the dangers or costs associated with flooding and flood hazards. It is important that residents are informed of flood hazards on their property. So as part of that, and as part of the county's participation in the National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP, we work with the state and FEMA to update the county's floodplain maps as our understanding of flood risk changes over time. Currently, most of the county's effective flood insurance rate maps, or FIRMs, which are the FEMA floodplain maps, most of those are based on studies from the 1980s or 1990s. So for reasons that we'll get into more in a minute, the maps needed to be updated after the 2013 flood. I'm going to hand it over to Christine to talk a little bit more about the NFIP.
Thanks, Kelly. The National Flood Insurance Program, or NFIP, is a program that's overseen by FEMA. The two main purposes of the NFIP are to, first and foremost, identify and communicate flood risk. And the second main purpose is to restrict floodplain development. It's overseen by FEMA, as I mentioned. It's managed by communities who then do restrict that floodplain development through their ordinances. And it is also enforced by lenders. Once a community is part of the NFIP or joins the NFIP, they are required to regulate that development. So part of this is what we update our maps periodically, so that helps the communities to regulate to those maps. The NFIP also provides opportunities for homeowners and renters to purchase flood insurance. And we also provide through federal assistance funding through grants and disaster assistance to mitigate risks. And we create our floodplain studies through engineers and scientists performing extensive analyses so that we can create these maps. I do want to just throw in one last thing. Most homeowners and renters policies do not cover floods, and only 1 inch of floodwater can cause approximately $25,000 in damages. So we try to promote the purchase of flood insurance. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you. And then I think, Casey, you're up next to talk about Colorado Hazard Mapping Program.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. So as we are familiar, flood, and as Kelly mentioned, flood plains are not static. And we're, all have in our memory the recent floods from 2013 and some other areas of the state, even more recent, that bring to mind the importance of making sure that we've identified flood hazards as appropriately and accurately as we can. The state undertook a very large effort to update a lot of the flood hazards as a result and after the flooding. It was called the Colorado Hazard Mapping Program, or CHAMP, if you've heard that. And we don't think that just because something's studied once and done that it's good for a long time. We know that things change, streams move, things get eroded, we gather more data. All of that goes into helping us make sure that we have identified accurate flood hazard and flood plains. And so as part of this study, we want to make sure that we're communicating the updates of the results of these studies so that communities can regulate floodplains and development in such a way that they are making sure to protect life and property. That's, of course, one of the ultimate goals of identifying these hazards. As part of this study, there are some flood rate insurance maps, or the FIRMs, that will change. And there are regulatory impacts based off of the different zones that are designated, and we will show some of that, including the floodway. You'll hear some of that. Next slide. The study included multiple partners. We, of course, had FEMA, which is the federal agency that provides a lot of the funding and regulatory and guidance aspects. And so they were important partners as part of this study. The Colorado Water Conservation Board is a partner with FEMA to perform floodplain hazards, to help train and communicate with communities, to also, if there are any known or identified flood hazards that are out of date or that need some attention, they're able to work with FEMA and community officials to make sure that some of those areas get restudied. And again, as Kelly mentioned, the community officials, and Chris mentioned too, are really the boots on the ground, people that administer the National Flood Insurance Program. They communicate the risk to people. They work with developers, they get permits. They also work for ways to mitigate, and they're able to work through either grants or other funding opportunities to see if they can't help communities and people find mitigations. They also are important to identify new risks. Sometimes the risks are not properly identified or just haven't been ever identified over the histories of development. And so if there are areas that involve updating flood hazards, they can bring that up to CWCB and to FEMA to be proposed for new studies. And of course, there are private stakeholders, residents, landowners, developers, engineering firms that all use this data or are parts of it for different aspects. And so this overall partnership has been true for this study, and it'll be true for studies to come. Next slide. Just a quick overview of the area that was studied, this little shaded gray area. These are some of the areas of the major rivers that drain into the South Platte River that were highly affected during the 2013 floods. Overall, there was about 470 miles of stream that were restudied. Highlighted in yellow were some of the miles that were stream miles that were updated in Boulder County, about 230. So quite a bit, a good percentage of the total stream miles that were updated were in Boulder County. Next slide. Just a brief overview of the type of data and process that goes into a typical flood hazard study. First and foremost, we need updated information about the land, how high that is, where the low parts are, where the floodplains are, where the streams are. That's called terrain or topographic data. We use very accurate methods to gather on a mass scale. It's called LIDAR, light detection and ranging. They're flown by planes with very accurate GPS measurements, and they're able to pick up massive amounts of information, topographic information. To supplement that, we send out surveyors into the field that are able to pick up information, things that maybe LIDAR would not pick up, like below water elevations in streams that are flowing more often, or they pick up information about bridges and culverts, and surveyors picked up quite a bit. Both of those are combined into inputs for our study. Next slide. Next, we gather the amount of water that could occur in an extreme event, and that's called hydrology, where we take precipitation gauges, statistical analyses of past floods and past events, stream gauges. All of that goes into determining what could happen in an extreme event, and that is reported in what you might hear as a flow, a peak flow, or a discharge. Cubic feet per second. And that's an important value. It's a statistical amount. It's not a specific storm or not, but it's an amalgamation of all the input and data that we have. And one of the main reasons why we are updating is because some of the older studies that Kelly had mentioned did not have 20 or 30 or 40 years of extra amount of data. And so it's important that we capture that as part of this study. The next part is hydraulics, where we take that amount of the flow that could come in an extreme event, and we model as it could go, how fast it could go, how deep it could go. That's called hydraulics, and we use modern and updated methodologies and programs to analyze that. Next slide. The output of these models are generally floodplains, and they are depictions that we put either in on a paper map or a digital map or digital GIS systems to map the extents of the floodplains and floodways, and therefore ease of use so that we can identify those areas, overlay them with homes, structures, building areas, or proposed developments. And these get depicted on maps in multiple ways. There's the flood zones. You'll see the zoomed in of the firm there. We also depict on these cross sections, which are areas that are used in the hydraulic models to compute those water surface elevations. We also depict base flood elevations, or the elevation that the water could get to in an extreme event, in the 1% annual chance event. And then we also depict the floodway, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Next slide. We often get asked, are these accurate? And that's a good question. It's a great question. And they are to what we understand them to be. There's limitations in many things that we do, but since we're gathering the most accurate topographic data that we have at the time, we believe it's accurate. But again, that information was gathered at a specific point in time. So, if the stream has another event where it erodes or moves, that is not captured until it's been surveyed or new information is updated. Floodplains are not a static event. There are other things that impact hazards. We could have a dam failure. We could have debris to clog up that could cause flows to pick a new path or flood new areas. Fires are a major thing here in Colorado. We have post-wildfire events where just a slight amount of rain immediately after a fire can cause extreme damage, and floodplains and flood hazards in areas that were not mapped because previously it was mapped with assuming natural conditions where vegetation is grown. It's important to note that these are a snapshot in time based off of the methodology that we have, using most up-to-date at the methodology we have, and the input data that we have. As new data comes available or new models and methods become available, they eventually make their way as studies get to be updated. But for intents and purposes, these are accurate for the snapshot in time. I'll highlight here that this study's undergone multiple levels of review, internal review process, detailed review through FEMA and their guidelines. The communities have had a chance to review and add comments, and it's gone through multiple revisions. So there's a lot of quality control that has gone into this entire study to make sure that they meet the most up-to-date guidelines and standards. Next slide.
And I think this is, back to me.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks,
Kelly.
Casey. Yeah, thank you, Casey. So the process that we just went through was done in 2 phases for Boulder County. And again, this is for unincorporated parts of Boulder County only. The hydraulic study and floodplain mapping that Casey just talked about were mostly done in 2016. The county then did outreach and held public meetings for that first phase, phase 1, which are the orange reaches on this map on the slide here. And so we did outreach and held public meetings in 2017. Comments that we received from the public were reviewed and incorporated into the mapping, and then all of that was sent to FEMA for review. Areas that had active road or stream restoration projects, such as 4 Mile Canyon Drive, most of Left Hand Canyon Drive, were put into phase 2 to better capture all the changes that were happening. But that same process of draft mapping, public outreach, and comment was done in 2017 and 2018 for phase 2. The Board of County Commissioners then adopted those draft maps as the best available information at that time. So since 2017 and 2018, the county has been regulating development in both the FEMA and Boulder County floodplain, which is the Boulder County floodplain is the one that reflects the CHAMP mapping. In September 2019, FEMA released preliminary flood insurance rate maps, or preliminary firms, which were mostly pretty similar to the draft maps that had already been adopted by the county. So I've split this timeline here into the Boulder County and the FEMA actions from 2020 onwards. So in January of 2020, we did a series of 6 public meetings leading up to FEMA's 90-day appeal period. That appeal period was when anyone had the opportunity to comment on or appeal the preliminary flood insurance rate maps. That 90-day appeal period started in March of 2020, which was also the start of the pandemic. So as a result of that, there was also a second appeal period in 2021. 9 of the 10 appeals that we received were resolved after the 2021 appeal period, One appeal for the middle portion of Left Hand Creek, right around Oxford Road, went to a third-party scientific resolution panel, and that panel was conducted in 2022. And the decision of that panel ultimately resulted in a portion of Left Hand Creek being restudied. That restudy will be happening in the future, and the folks affected by that restudy have been informed of that separately through a whole different meeting. In July of this year, FEMA released revised preliminary flood insurance rate maps that reflected all of those appeals. So here we are in the end of 2023, holding this informational meeting and doing outreach to let you know that next year there will be new FEMA flood insurance rate maps, new FEMA firms. We expect those firms to go effective in approximately July of 2024, but we'll know the exact date in the next month or so. At the same time, on the county side in 2024, we are going to propose to the Planning Commission that the Boulder County floodplain that was previously adopted as the best available information be essentially removed for champ reaches. So to restate what I just said there, on the Boulder County side, these are the two parallel processes I mentioned at the beginning. So on the county side, we are proposing to remove the Boulder County floodplain for champ reaches, and that will be done via a zoning docket, including a public hearing with the Planning Commission. We're thinking potentially as soon as their January 2024 meeting, so next month, with the Planning Commission, and then pending a recommendation from the Planning Commission, we would also have a hearing with the Board of County Commissioners. You can check the website or sign up for the floodplain remapping email list to find out about those hearing dates. We are accepting comments on this proposal through January 2nd, and you can, again, as always, send those comments to floodplainadmin@bouldercounty.gov. And if we get them by January 2nd, we will include those in the packet that gets sent to the Planning Commission. On the FEMA side, the revised preliminary flood insurance rate maps will become the effective firms in, as I said, approximately July 2024. So you may be wondering, this study was done in 2018 or 2017, 2018 timeframe. There have been some significant construction projects in floodplains since then. How are those going to be reflected in the maps? And the answer is that they will be, but they're not yet reflected in the maps. And that's because after that July-ish effective date for the new firms, there will be a series of what FEMA calls letters of map revision, or LOMARs, that will be incorporated into the maps in the second half of 2024. So if your property was affected by one of these LOMARs, you should have already received a letter. Usually these letters are delivered via certified mail. You have to sign for it. And those had the LOMAR information. But feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about any of those LOMARs. Big picture, the result of these two parallel processes is that the FEMA flood insurance rate map will be the one effective map for champ reaches going forward. All right, so you're wondering, how does this affect your property? To find that out, you want to go to www.boco.org/floodplain remapping. And I think that link got put in the chat at the beginning of the meeting. So once you're there, you click the orange button that says View Preliminary Firms, and it will take you to the interactive map that I have a screenshot of here on the screen. If you zoom in, you're going to see some cross-hatching, and I know it's a little hard to read. What I recommend that you do is in the layer list, click the layer that says current Boulder County flood risk zones, and that'll bring up colors, and you'll see that the current Boulder County floodplain matches the preliminary FEMA floodplain, because FEMA is now incorporating this CHAMP mapping that the county has already adopted. If there are any discrepancies, that's because it was an area where an appeal was approved. So the example that's on the screen at the moment, you can see Boulder County floodway 100-year and 500-year, which are the purple, pink, and green colors, match the preliminary FEMA hatching and cross-hatching. You can also see that there is no proposed Boulder County floodplain because, again, our proposal is to remove the Boulder County floodplain for CHAMP reaches. If you want to compare this floodplain to the currently effective FEMA map, you'll have to click the current FEMA flood hazard zones layer. All right, so if you're looking at the map and you're wondering, can I change this? What are my options? Well, the appeal period for the FEMA firms is over. No new appeals will be accepted. However, there is always the option to apply for a letter of map amendment, or LOMA. A LOMA is where you have a surveyor come out and measure the actual elevations around your house or property. And if those elevations are above the base flood elevations, or the water surface elevation of that modeled 100-year or 1% annual chance flood, FEMA will issue a letter saying that the structure or area is actually above or outside that 100-year floodplain. LOMAs are different than the letter of map revision, or LOMAR process. LOMARs change the floodplain map itself. And as I said earlier, they're generally associated with construction projects or other studies that affect a larger portion of the floodplain as opposed to a single structure. And I already mentioned we have about 25 LOMARs that are going to go effective after the FEMA effective date. All right, I want to spend a little bit of time on flood insurance because this is really the thing that is changing with this update to the flood insurance rate maps. So big picture, everyone can purchase flood insurance, homeowners, renters, if you're in the floodplain, if you're out of the floodplain. If you are in the FEMA floodplain, the FEMA flood insurance rate map, and you have a federally backed mortgage, your lender will require you to maintain flood insurance. However, technically, your lender can also require you to maintain flood insurance whether or not you are in the floodplain. When people signed up for this meeting, they had the option to submit a question. Many of those questions were about insurance, so I'm just going to answer some of those frequently asked questions up front here. And okay, so number one, is flood insurance mandatory for properties in the floodplain? So as I said, that depends on whether you have a mortgage. Your lender is the one that will require you to maintain flood insurance. All right, number two, this is a common question we get. Someone's asking if there is 100-year or 500-year floodplain on their property, but the structure itself is outside the floodplain. Will I be required to maintain flood insurance? No, but again, lenders can require you to maintain flood insurance anywhere. If you're in this situation, that letter of map amendment, or LOMA, is a good option for you. That would be the the way to show that you are out of the floodplain. Number 3, does floodway affect flood insurance? No. The floodway is not related to insurance. Will the map change affect your premiums? So it used to be that if you were in FEMA's 100-year floodplain, you would have a very high premium or rate. And if you were outside, you would have a lower rate. FEMA has changed how they determine those rates. So actually flood zone is no longer a factor in determining your flood insurance premiums. Rather, it's associated with a whole host of factors: when the building was built, the foundation type, the distance from the flooding source, all those sorts of things. So if you have questions about any of that, you definitely want to talk to your insurance agent or lender. Of course, I have to say our recommendation is always to maintain flood insurance. It is not covered by regular homeowners insurance. But again, questions should be directed to insurance agents. All right, development. This is the one where I can definitely answer your development questions. Floodplain admin at bouldercounty.gov. The requirements in Boulder County, unincorporated Boulder County, for development in floodplains are found in the Boulder County Land Use Code, Article 4-400. We do have different requirements for the floodway versus what we call the flood fringe, which is the portion of the 100-year floodplain outside the floodway. And I'm going to talk about that right here. So the floodway is a zone within the 100-year floodplain that must be reserved for passage of the 100-year flood event. So if you imagine developing in a floodplain, building a building, doing a bit of grading, over time, the cumulative impacts of those blockages to the flood water will increase flood depths, or what we call water surface elevations. So the floodway is the portion of the floodplain where the model shows that cumulative development will increase water surface elevations more than 1/2 foot, which is the floodway limit in Colorado. In Boulder County, we do not allow construction of new buildings in the floodway. Other types of development may be allowed in the floodway as long as an engineer can certify that the development would not increase base flood elevations. In the flood fringe, so the area outside the floodway, but still within the 100-year floodplain, pretty much all types of development are allowed with a floodplain development permit and appropriate flood protection measures. So often for buildings, for example, a common flood protection measure is elevating the first floor of the structure above a certain elevation. All right, so some final thoughts and takeaways. First of all, where it rains, it floods. Whether or not your property is in a regulatory or mapped floodplain, you could experience flood damages. So as always, be aware during flood season, don't drive through floodwaters, and have a plan for when, not if, but when the next flood happens. Second, talk to your insurance agent and lender about insurance requirements. Number 3, send your comments on the zoning docket to floodplainadmin@bouldercounty.gov before January 2nd. And finally, check the website, www.boco.org/floodplain remapping, for updates for the future meeting and hearing dates. And you can also sign up for our email distribution list there. We'll get to questions. I'll come back to this contact slide in a minute when we go over the questions. I just want to say again for folks on the phone, if you have questions specific to your property, call or email me. My phone number is 720-564-2652. It was also on the postcard that got sent out to all property owners in the floodplain. We send out these postcards. We got a question about this, which is why I'm mentioning it. We send out postcards and notifications of changes to floodplain maps and meetings to all property owners whose property intersects the floodplain overlay district, which is our floodplain, 100-year floodplain. All right, so we're going to go through we have a few questions in the Q&A, so keep sending your questions in through that method. Again, if you are on the phone, which it looks like we have at least a couple people on the phone, if you wish to ask a question, you will have to press *9 to raise your hand. That will let us know that you want to ask a question. You will then have to press *6 to unmute yourself once we call on you. So again, if you're on the phone, *9 to raise or lower your hand. Everyone else, keep your questions coming into the Q&A feature. If we have time at the end, we will also take some questions from people who raise their hand. All right, Casey, would you mind just going through the answer you gave to Eric's question?
Absolutely. So I'll read it in case people are unable to see if they're on their phone or whatever. Eric asked, does the county or other agency plan on further studies to verify the floodplain extents? I gather data used for modeling North Boulder Creek floodplain used only LiDAR with no on-the-ground surveys. Some bridges were included and others were not due to tree cover. Culverts also not included. Can floodplain maps in this area be considered accurate without any surveys? That's a great question, Eric. And I'll first use the terminology. There are enhanced studies which do incorporate in the field survey and in addition to topographic LiDAR, and there are base level, meaning the minimum level. And when this stream was scoped back a long time ago, it was the study methodology that it was scoped for was a base level, meaning it would incorporate just the LiDAR and not have any in the field survey. And that's due to a lot of competing criteria. Sometimes it's funding based, sometimes it's needs based. There's a lot of criteria that go into determining where to have in the field survey or not. It was noted that it would be more beneficial to have at least some flood hazard identified, even if in the field survey could not be performed in this area. So it was chosen back at that time to perform the base level analysis along North Boulder Creek. I did mention that, of course, if there's anybody knows that there's anything inaccurate or they notice things that need to be updated, bring that forward to your floodplain administrators and your local community officials. As more funding and more needs become identified, then they get placed at the top for the next round of studies. So there is an opportunity for updates to be made in the future based off of studies. There's also, as Kelly mentioned, there are letters of map revisions that can be done in specific areas for cases like this. So there are ways to incorporate future information and in the field survey, but as is noted, not all streams were studied with the same level of methodology. And there was a lot of thought that was put into what and why, but there's a lot of criteria that goes into that. If you have any further questions, feel free to let us know.
And I do think the upper portion of North Boulder Creek was base level, but I think the sort of populated portion through Apple Valley was an enhanced reach with that did have survey of those culverts, but we can get back to you on that.
That is correct, Kelly. It's the very
Yeah.
upper portion that was not surveyed. As it comes down and combines with Boulder Creek, there is some survey.
Yeah, Kelly, I think you're thinking about North St. Vrain Creek.
Sorry. Yep, sorry.
North Boulder Creek was all base level, and the base level was chosen in areas that were generally in the canyons that were not very populated or minimally populated and pretty channelized. And I'll just add that even the base level studies, when the hydraulic model is being prepared, the cross sections for the hydraulic model are placed specifically so that you get an accurate representation of the flood risk, even though there's not survey. So, and then I'll turn off with that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, thank you both. All right. All right, I see Bill's question. And thanks, Sarah. I'm seeing the questions here, but let me know if I miss anything. Even if flood maps are accurate, the county property line maps are inaccurate. How is this considered in determining if flood insurance is required? So, yes, Bill, there is a known issue with parcel lines in the mountainous areas of Boulder County, and someone from the assessor's office could explain why that is better than I could. Essentially, so the floodplain maps themselves do not take into account a parcel line. So the floodplain maps relative to the topography are accurate. It is the parcel boundaries that are sometimes off in the mountains. For flood insurance, it should be based on the location of the structure, not where the parcel boundary is. So if you are having any problems with your insurance or lender or whoever, it's, you can show them where the actual house is relative to the floodplain, and the parcel boundaries shouldn't be taken into account. I know there's some, especially in the Riverside area, Riverside Drive, the parcels are small, and then, basically your house looks like it's on a different parcel. So it may just be a matter of just finding that address specific to an aerial photo of the property relative to the floodplain and not the parcel boundary. I don't know if Ron has any, or anyone else wants to chime in on that. Yeah,
Kelly, the only thing I'll add is the determination on whether flood insurance is required is determined by the insurance agency, and they'll generally hire what's called a determination company to look at the floodplain and look at where that house or structure is and make that determination just based on that. So that the determination is not made by FEMA, it's not made by the state, it's not made by the county, it's made by the insurance company.
Thanks, Kevin. All right. Can you talk about the upcoming projects related to the floodplain areas? Ross, I don't know if you want to specify that. We can either have you come off mute, or you can type a clarification of that. Which projects you're asking about, because I'm not quite sure on that one. All right, I'm just going to keep chugging away on this. Question from Tim. I'm looking at the interactive map with the current Boulder County regulatory flood risk zones, layer active, and I noticed that, at least in North Boulder, the map data is only west of Broadway and does not extend east of Broadway into the unincorporated county enclaves. Is that accurate? Yes, Tim, that is correct. So the CHAMP study, for example, on 4 Mile Canyon Creek only extended to the city-county line. The city of Boulder was not participating in the CHAMP process. So all of the FEMA floodplains that you see in the city of Boulder are for now remaining the effective floodplain. So in the city of Boulder, first of all, well, you're in an unincorporated enclave surrounded by the city, but the FEMA floodplain is the one that is relevant to you, and there's no proposed update to that. All right.
Kelly, I'll just add a little context on when this was scoped out.
Yeah.
You know, so there were specific reasons why it kind of stopped at the county boundary and didn't include the enclaves, is because when you're preparing a hydraulic model, it's hard to piecemeal it. You can do big reaches or, you know, decent sized reaches, but to include those enclaves would have been difficult to restudy without doing it all the way through the city of Boulder.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Similar question from Michelle: is the city of Boulder also remapping the floodplain? Our neighborhood is both city and county. So again, same sort of answer. City was not part of this CHAMP process. They remapped their floodplains sort of cyclically and separately. So if you see, depending on where exactly your neighborhood is, may or may not have been part of the CHAMP study. All right, what is an example of a CHAMP reach? So a reach is just a portion of a stream. You can tell the CHAMP reaches because, well, I'll show it on the presentation here. Sorry, here we go. So this map with the purple and orange shows the CHAMP reaches. So again, we were just talking about sort of North Boulder area. So for example, 4 Mile Canyon Creek. There's the upper portion of that watershed was included in CHAMP, but the part that goes through the city and then into eventually Boulder Creek was not included in CHAMP. So those are the CHAMP reaches. And they're also the reaches generally that have basically a preliminary, that have something with preliminary flood insurance rate map on them. All right, Eric, follow up to your question. Base level analysis on creeks that were not studied previously will certainly place some homes in or out of floodplain incorrectly. Casey, I don't know, do you want to follow up at all on your?
I'll just say that you know, it's important to capture flood hazard, and we realize that there are limits and constraints with the funding that FEMA gives and the amount of analyses that sometimes is needed. If there are areas that you're aware that are inaccurate, bring those up. We put them, they get categorized as a needs for future revisions, and CWCB makes periodic revisions all throughout the state. So if we know of these beforehand and are aware of them, we can come back and we can do restudies in the future when certain criteria are met and funding's available. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything to that, but it is a nature of flood hazard to identify. We want to make sure that we are protecting life and property. And there are many streams that flooded in 2013 that didn't have any flood hazards identified. And I think that's one of the driving things, is to at least have something identified with what funding was available.
Yeah, and those LIDAR studies are pretty accurate. Yeah, thanks.
I'll say relatively much more accurate than the previous old topographic data that were based off quad maps or any old data. Terry, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that sometimes the LiDAR is not going to pick up as much detail if there's something specific around your property, like a lot of vegetation or some of those issues. And so that's why the LOMA process that Kelly was talking about earlier, where you can get survey around your property to actually show what those elevations are, can be helpful.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add is, you know, when we're talking a comparison of base level versus enhanced level, the only difference is the base level is missing the survey. So the base level still goes through the same type of hydrologic analysis, the same type of hydraulic analysis, the same scrutiny from quality control that is done by multiple agencies, FEMA, Boulder County, the state. And so I think we feel very comfortable that it accurately represents the risk. It just doesn't have the survey.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, moving on to a question from Wendy. After owning since the 1980s, our property is now labeled almost totally in the floodway. We used to be able to develop any way we wanted. Now, is it true that if our property burned down, we would not be able to rebuild? That is not true, Wendy. So whether or not you're in the floodway, you are subject to the same substantial improvement and substantial damage requirements. So if you have an existing property that's damaged in a flood or a fire or any other event, and it's a substantial damage, I'll direct you to Article 4-413 of the Boulder County Land Use Code. You can rebuild that. You would not be able to necessarily expand on the square footage that you had before, but you would be able to rebuild in a way that basically brought you into compliance with the current code. So you might have to elevate to a higher elevation if your initial house was below that base flood elevation, but you would be allowed to rebuild. Many people did rebuild after the 2013 flood. And then a second question, why aren't the municipalities held to these strict development rules? They seem to be allowed to develop as much as they please and therefore affect us in the county downstream. So the cities have their own floodplain regulations. City of Boulder regulates their high hazard zone in this very similar way, I believe, to the way the county regulates the floodway. All municipalities within Boulder County have to comply with the FEMA minimum standards for development, even if they are not, even if they don't have their own sort of enhanced ordinances around floodplains or whatever it is. So the municipalities are definitely regulating floodplains and regulating development in floodplains. But obviously, I would have to ask them what their regulations are specifically.
Kelly, the only thing I'll add to that is that when any project is done, the impacts have to be analyzed to the full extent of what those impacts are. And if the impacts extend to other counties or other municipalities, not only do those counties and municipalities have to be informed, but the impacted properties have to be informed.
Right. So if there's a construction project that's spanning the city and the county, or the city's doing something that affects floodplains in the county, we review that as part of that LOMAR process that I mentioned earlier. And again, all municipalities are meeting FEMA's minimum standards for that.
And I guess the only thing that I would add to that is that there are some state standards that are higher than FEMA standards. And so all communities, whether they're counties or cities, do need to regulate to those higher standards as well.
Yes, FEMA and state standards. Thank you, Terry. Okay, question from Stephen. The county boundary lines on these maps are incorrect by 30 feet or more. Our neighbor's building is shown improperly on our property. These could affect insurance rates. I think this might be the same question that Bill asked about parcel boundaries, not necessarily like the whole outside county boundary. So there is, as I said, this known issue in the mountains with parcel boundaries. And again, that should not affect your insurance rates. And the companies that determine those are looking at, you know, the structures themselves in relation to the floodplain. Let me know if I didn't, if I misunderstood that question, Stephen. Paul, if our home is grayed out in a grayed out area of the map, does that mean there are no changes to the map? So probably yes. If it's, there are a couple reasons it could be grayed out. One, it's grayed out because it's in a municipality. So you would want to check with your municipality on the floodplain map for your city or town. The other reason it could be grayed out is it's in one of those boxes that says area of no, areas with no FEMA flood hazard zone update. So these are boxes, basically FEMA divides their firms, the flood insurance rate maps, into panels, and only some of the panels are being updated as part of this process. So if you're in one of those boxes that says area of no FEMA update, that panel is not being updated right now. And so the effective map going forward will be the currently effective FEMA map. Roy, you spoke of public outreach meetings in 2017 and appeal periods in 2020 and 2021. How did you advise or advertise the public of these meetings? We never received any notifications. So all of those meetings were advertised in a very similar way to the way we advertise this meeting. Postcards were sent to all property owners whose property intersected the 100-year or any floodplain. We also, they were doing a ton of outreach at that time. They had newsletters, they had an email distribution list. So there was quite a bit of outreach. Of course, somehow folks get missed. So that's, but basically it was the same outreach process at that time as we're using now. And again, hearings before the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners at that time. Is there anyone? Kevin, want to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to respond to Ross's question and say that, you know, post-flood, a lot of the severely impacted areas developed watershed master plans that identified projects that should be completed to protect the residents moving forward and to restore certain areas. A lot of those projects have been completed. Some of the projects haven't been fully completed, but are probably on a list. And I would suggest to Ross, and Kelly, I'm gonna put you on the spot. If you're concerned about a specific area that may have flooded, you know, reach out to the county and specifically Kelly, and she can talk through specific projects that might be either ongoing in the works or planned in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. All right, I don't see any more questions in Q&A. We are at 7:05. I don't see any raised hands. Rick, have I missed anything? Rick or Sarah?
Kenneth Denault just raised his hand. I can allow him to talk if you want to take that question. And Kenneth, you'll just need to unmute.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I would like to address what I think is kind of the elephant in the room, and is obviously flood insurance is important, but the regulatory effect on property owners, particularly if a floodway is imposed upon on one's home or property, it creates a health and safety effect far greater than any flood itself, particularly in a broad flat area where myself and my neighbors are located. And we, as you know, had to fight this for several years with the county, ultimately resulting in the victory in the SRP, the Scientific Resolution Panel, which is essentially FEMA's Supreme Court decision making. Now we are left with a position where, we prevailed under that decision, but our homes, according to the Boulder regulatory maps, are still shown as being in a floodway. And we need to get that dismissed. We know that Boulder County can alter and has altered the regulatory maps in the past without going through before the Planning Commission or the county commissioners, which I understand you're going to have to do to change the floodway overlay zoning, floodplain overlay zoning. But for the time being, we want our properties removed from this status, and we need help in doing that. So I would like to request that the county do that and know how soon we can expect that to be done.
Yeah, thanks. So in terms of how soon, we would like to take this to the Planning Commission. One thing we can request is, so the FEMA maps are going to go effective, we think July-ish 2024. We will be keeping the Boulder County floodplain that reflects the CHAMP mapping for the rest of the county until that time, because we will be regulating, as we have been doing, both the Boulder County and the FEMA floodplains up until FEMA changes their maps. And we have the one map going forward. One thing we can request of Planning Commission is that for that area that was subject to the Left Hand Creek appeal and Scientific Resolution Panel, is to change that earlier, because that is going to change. So that will just be subject to the timing of Planning Commission hearing and ultimately the Board of County Commissioners hearing, who makes those final recommendations. So we are taking that into account, and appreciate your comments to commissioners on that point, to encourage a sort of phased thing for that Scientific Resolution Panel area.
Could I make a further inquiry?
Sure.
I appreciate your response, but I don't understand why in the past, I mean, for instance, when these floodways were initially imposed upon us, that was done without any input from the Planning Commission or the county commissioners. And again, I understand your need to go through the zoning process, but why could you not? And there have been other examples as well, and I'm sure our engineer could come up with them readily, but I just don't see, why this additional process is necessary. It's certainly damaging to us and to our particularly as senior citizens. And as you know, we are all elderly here. And this has been a very harmful process to us, and at the hands of the county. And we need this done. And the county has shown that it has had the ability to change these regulatory maps, regardless of the zoning in the past.
So I'm not aware of any change to the Boulder County floodplain that can be done without the input of Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners. The Boulder County floodplain was created in 2015-16, specifically for the adoption of the phase 1 and phase 2 of the CHAMP maps. And so that was all done with hearings before Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners. So, you know, I know it's upsetting when you're placed in a floodway, and we are working towards having our maps meet the recommendations of scientific resolution panels and the FEMA mapping and everything that's been done. So unfortunately, these things do take a long time. And so, we're working on it, and encourage you to come to that Planning Commission hearing and express those thoughts.
May I send you the examples, and
Sure.
then rather than be late. Thank you
Thanks.
for your.
Yep, thank you. Okay, I think we're, I don't see any other hands, so I'm probably gonna wrap this up. Mike, I see you raising and lowering your hand. I'm not sure if you want to speak. I don't know, Rick, can we have, Mike, you'll have to unmute yourself. I think you've been promoted to be able to speak.
Great. I'm Ken's neighbor. You know this. I've been to several of these meetings. Why cannot you just put a red box around the area in question on Left Hand Creek in the current map that pulls up, that any realtor would pull up, that any Tom, Dick, or Harry would pull up and say, this area is under restudy, or, you know, the asterisk that says, please call Kelly to find out what's going on in this area.
Yeah.
The problem is we don't want to sit here for the next 8 or 9 months when a realtor pulls up that map and sees us in the floodway, when we know already those maps are in error.
Yeah. Well, it hopefully won't be 8 or 9 months. We'll see. I'll take that suggestion to our mapping folks. I don't know if it would be that easy, but certainly when folks do come in with questions about that area, I've been telling them exactly what you've said, and that this area is under restudy and so on. But you know, I get it when you see it on a map, it's not comfortable. So yeah, we'll see what we can do. I do think we can have a solution for that by the time we get to the Planning Commission and Board of County Commissioners hearing, which, as I say, hopefully should be January. So within 6 weeks here.
That would be a great help. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I'm not seeing any further hands or questions, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your comments. Please reach out to me if you have questions, comments at any point. And yeah, thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, everyone.
Kelly. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.